When we're drawing in two-point perspective, how do we show shadows accurately? For this video, I'm assuming that we know how to draw in two-point perspective. If not, then put this on pause and go and watch my video on how to draw in two-point perspective. But right now in this video, we're going to look at two methods of drawing shadows in two-point perspective. The first one is the technically correct method, and it's a great choice when the light source is close, such as an interior light or a lamp, or when the sun is very low in the sky, close to the horizon. The second method is a simpler, more practical method to use when we want the shadow for objects outside and the sun is very high in the sky. So we have our eye level here, or horizon as it is sometimes called, and we have two vanishing points, and we have our rectangle as defined in this two-point perspective view. The first thing we need to do is decide on a light source, which for the sake of this example, I'm going to put here. However, I could have put it anywhere above the eye level or the horizon line. And the first thing I need to do is to draw what I'm calling light lines from our light source through the corners of the object, which are going to help define the shadow shape. So from our light source through the top corners of our object, I draw these lines. However, just as our two-point perspective needs vanishing points, our shadows need their own vanishing point, usually referred to as the shadow vanishing point. The shadow vanishing point is easy to find. It's the line directly down from the light source until it hits the eye level or the horizon line, and that becomes our shadow point. Now, just as light lines came from our light source through the top corners of our object, so our shadow lines go through our bottom corner reference points and the shadow vanishing point. So we'll take this point first. It's good to make note that this is the light line passing through the top corner of this corner of the rectangle. So we draw a line from the shadow vanishing point through the bottom corner, and we note where the light line on the top corner and the shadow line on the bottom corner meet. We do the same for this corner. So we need to draw a line through the bottom point of this line, and then we make a note of where they meet. We need to do it through this corner as well. And it's helpful, I think, in this case to do it for this corner of our box. So here is the light line coming down from the top. We go to our shadow vanishing point and we draw a line through the bottom corner. And it meets at pretty well the same spot. And so our shadow is formed by joining up the spots where the light lines intersect with the shadow lines. And to make it perhaps just a little bit more straightforward, and it's clear that there is shade on two sides of this rectangular box. My video before this one is the difference between shade and shadow, and I'm applying that information here. So there we have drawing a shadow in two-point perspective in its simplest form. The shadow is formed where the light is blocked from hitting another object, in this case the ground, by the space between the top and the lower points of another object. So it makes sense that the boundary points of the shadow is formed where the line from the light source going through the top of our object and the shadow line from the shadow vanishing point going through the bottom of that same point. Now, while this is a very accurate way, it has limitations. Firstly, it really only works if the light source is on the far side of the object. If this light was coming from over my shoulder, then we would have no way to represent that shadow using this method. Equally, while this positioning of a light source above the eye level or horizon works well for what could be a room light or a torch light or the sun very low on the horizon, it doesn't work for the middle of the day when the sun is very high in the sky. The scale of the distance of the sun, many millions of kilometers away from Earth, makes this not feasible. So for these situations, we have a more approximate method. Here we have another rectangle in a slightly more extreme two-point perspective. There are two important factors that we need to decide upon. The first is the light angle. The light angle is from how high a point the light is coming down onto our object. Is it coming straight down? Is it coming slightly from one side? Is it coming from an extreme side position? The second thing we need to consider is the light direction. Is the light coming from the far side of the object straight towards the object? Is the light coming from in front of the object towards the object? Is the light coming from this side crossing the object at an angle? Or is the light direction from this side crossing the object the opposite angle? These considerations take into account that the sun could be behind me and therefore casting a shadow towards the rear of our object. How do we make this work? In our first method, all the light lines go back to the light source. In this method, our light source is regarded as being many millions of kilometers away. And so even though, yes, the lines do meet up at the point of the sun, in effect, what we see is that these lines appear to be parallel. So we choose the light angle, and let's take the light angle as this. We will choose a fairly steep light angle. And then that's the angle now that we draw through our corners, our top corners. But the important thing to note is that now we don't take these lines back to a light source, we draw them parallel to each other. So the angle is the same. So we've drawn a parallel line at the same angle as the light angle through each of the four corners. Now we need to consider the light direction. I think we're going to make the light direction this direction. So again, we do the same thing. Through our four corners, we draw parallel lines to the light direction. And what do we get? We get the light line coming through this top corner and the light direction coming from the bottom corner on the same line meeting here. With this corner, we get the light line and the light direction that goes through the corresponding bottom point of this line here. And to get this third corner here, we have this light line here, and again we have this light direction line passing through the bottom of this line, and those lines intersect there. And so what I get when I join these lines up is this. And so I will just make it a bit clearer. We can see that the shadow is cast on two sides, and we can see that this side and this side of our rectangle are going to be in sunlight, and this side and this far side are going to be in shade, and that the shadow is going to be cast on these two sides therefore. And because the angle of the light is relatively high in the sky, the shadow doesn't come too far out. Whereas plotting the shadows using this method, the light source ends up being relatively low, which therefore means we invariably cast quite long shadows. And I'll just make clear that our light direction and our light angle. And again, I'll apply some tone. And that's it. Plotting the shadow of an object in two-point perspective using the approximation method. And remember, if you're creating a scene totally from your own imagination, the light angle and the light direction are whatever you want to make them. If we're drawing from life, then we're looking at copying what we see in front of us. But understanding about light angles and light direction can help us observe more accurately what we're seeing, and therefore to find it easier to actually draw more accurately. Now obviously, if we're drawing something more complex than a box, we're going to have more corners and more points of reference that we need to plot with our light angles and our light directions. But we'll save a more complicated example for another video. Hi, I'm Stephen Travers. I hope you found that helpful. I don't think either of those methods is superior to the other. I think what you'll find is if you need to plot a shadow accurately for an object in two-point perspective, I think one of them will be more helpful to use than the other, and that's the one you choose. I hadn't worked out myself exactly how we determine those shadows until I was preparing my video on the difference between shade and shadow and realized that I didn't know where exactly to put the shadows. We're always learning, we're always practicing, we're always getting better at our art. And as I've often said, if we know what to expect when we're copying a scene, it's going to be easier for us to accurately observe it in that scene. And therefore, we have a better chance of drawing it accurately because at least we know what we're drawing. Anyway, whatever you're drawing, have fun. And if you're finding these videos helpful, please leave a comment, like them, share them, tell your friends, subscribe, hit notifications. It really does help me develop my channel if you like what I'm doing and you do that for me. I'll see you next time. Bye.